Hermione Granger and the Philosopher's Stone. Chapter 9. The Midnight Duel. Hermione wasn't much of a fan of living with four other girls. They were all nice enough, but they were not very serious about their studies. Sure, the quest for the House Cup and the upcoming Quidditch, a popular wizarding game played on broomsticks with a fandom similar to Muggle football. Matches were very exciting, but not as exciting as the Gargoyle Strike of 1911. Hermione found it quite impossible to study in her room and had to instead set up shop in the Gryffindor common room. The following Tuesday, as Hermione was rereading her books for her first class, she saw a notice pinned on the bulletin board. Attention students. Flying lessons for the first year students will commence on the main grounds Thursday afternoon at 3:30 with the Slytherin first year students. Attendance is mandatory. Hermione's heart sank. She had absolutely no desire to learn how to fly. Flying was definitely something you couldn't learn out of a book, so Hermione was at a total loss. She could feel her anxiety growing exponentially over the next 2 days. On Wednesday, her birthday came and went, full of anxiety. Parvati had noticed the birthday card Hermione got in the owl post and wished her a happy birthday, but all Hermione could think about was having to fly the next day. Thursday morning, Hermione woke up and went down to breakfast. Neville, Harry, Ron, Seamus, and a few other Gryffindors were there, going on and on about flying and Quidditch. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he'd spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Neville, on the other hand, had never been on a broomstick in his life because his grandmother had never let him near one, which was probably a good idea, to be honest. Not to be outdone, and because the anxiety made her, Hermione tried to join the conversation. She rattled off anything she could think of from what she read in Quidditch Through Ages, and she had taken out of the library the minute she saw the notice. Neville was hanging on to her every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang on to his broomstick later. She was interrupted, however, by the morning owl post. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass ball the size of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. Oh, it's a remembrall, he explained. Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight like this, and if it turns red, oh. His face fell because the remembrall had suddenly glowed scarlet. You've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he'd forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the remembrall out of his hand. Harry and John jumped to their feet, beating Hermione to it. They were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in the school, was there in a flash. Hermione stayed seated. What's going on? Malfoy's got my remembrall, Professor. Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the remembrall back on the table. Just looking, he said, and he sloped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Hermione followed her fellow Gryffindors down the front steps onto the grounds. It was a clear, breezy day. The grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns towards a smooth, flat lawn. They were on the opposite side of the grounds to the Forbidden Forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Hermione eyed them with utter terror. Their teacher, Madame Hooch, arrived. She had short grey hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. Well, what are you all waiting for? She barked. Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up. Stick out your right hand over your broom and say up. Up! everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione's had simply twitched on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. After a few more times, Hermione's broom finally and very slowly rose in the air. Madame Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows, correcting their grips. Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground hard, said Madame Hooch. Keep your broom steady, rise a few feet, and then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle, 3, 2. But Neville, nervous and jumpy and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madame Hooch's lips. Hermione groaned. Come back, boy, Madame Hooch shouted. But Neville was riding straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Hermione saw his scared white face look down at the ground, falling away, saw him gasp, slip sideways off the broom, and wham! A thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher, and started to drift lazily towards the forbidden forest and out of sight. Madame Hooch was bending over Neville, her face as white as his. Broken wrist, she muttered. Come on, boy. It's all right. Up you get. She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear. Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madame Hooch, who had her arm around him. Hermione longed to go with them, but she couldn't disobey Madame Hooch. No sooner were they out of earshot than Draco Malfoy burst into laughter. Did you see his base, the great lamp? The other Slytherins joined in. Shut up, Malfoy, snapped Parvati Patil. In that moment, Hermione forgave Parvati for all of her distractions in the dorm room. Oh, sticking up for Longbottom, said Pansy Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. Never thought you liked fat little crybabies, Parvati. Look, said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the grass. It's that stupid thing Longbottom's gran sent him. The remembrall glittered in the sun as he held it up. Give it here, Malfoy, said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree? Give it here, Harry yelled. But Malfoy had leapt onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level with the topmost branches of an oak, he called, Come and get me, Potter. Harry grabbed his broom. Hermione gasped. She had to stop him. It was part of the new plan. He couldn't get expelled this early in the school year. It would ruin everything. No, shouted Hermione. Madame Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble. Harry ignored her. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground, and an admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. Give it here, Harry called, or I'll knock you off that broom. Oh, yeah, said Malfoy, trying to sneer but looking worried. He leaned forward, grasped the broom tightly in both hands, and it shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp, about face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. No crab and goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy, Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch it if you can, then, he shouted, and he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Hermione watched, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. Harry leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in a steep dive, racing the ball. He stretched out his hand. A foot from the ground, he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, and he toppled gently onto the grass with a Remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter! Hermione would know that voice anywhere. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. Hermione was overcome with dread. Never, in all my time at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her glasses flashed furiously. How dare you! You might have broken your neck. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patil. But Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now. Professor McGonagall and Harry walked back to the castle, leaving the rest of the students standing on the grounds, speechless. Hermione caught a glance at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces, and she could barely contain her anger. They had completely ruined everything, all of her plans, and they had hurt her first wizard friend, Neville. Without even knowing she was doing it, Hermione marched up to them. Who do you think you are? She screeched. She sounded almost as intimidating as Professor McGonagall. You had no right, absolutely no right to steal from a student, nor to get up on a broom where you were specifically told not to. Is she talking to me? Draco asked with a laugh. Is this bushy-haired know-it-all actually talking to me? You'd better believe she's talking to you, shouted Ron, who had somehow moved so he was next to Hermione without her realizing it. You no good, Git. You don't even know how to mount a broom properly. What, didn't Daddy buy you flying lessons? Draco's smug smirk immediately disappeared, and he took a step towards Ron as if to start a fight. Parvati rushed to their side, followed by Seamus, Dean, and the other Gryffindors. At least my father could afford them if he wanted to, Draco said, sticking out his chin. Or even a broom, for that matter. Could your family even afford one of these clean sweeps? He indicated the school broom still lying on the ground. I doubt it. Maybe a few of the bristles, but they wouldn't be able to eat for a week. It doesn't matter what they can afford, said Hermione. They don't have to buy their way through life. They earn it. Malfoy's pale face grew scarlet with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. He drew back his hand as if to hit Hermione, but Ron stepped into his way. As Draco started to throw his hand forward, he was stopped by a shrill whistle. What's going on here? Madame Hooch screamed from the front steps. 5 points from Slytherin. Draco's hand dropped. Now everyone back to your common rooms immediately. Hermione tried to catch Ron's eye as they all shuffled back into the castle, but he avoided looking at anyone. Maybe he wasn't as bad as Hermione thought. Later that evening, Hermione found a place at the Gryffindor table in the Great Hall and started rewriting her notes from the day. She had developed a sort of shorthand to take notes during class, so she could keep up with the professor's lessons, and then expanded upon them later. It really helped to not only understand but retain all of the information. A few seats down, Hermione heard Harry and Ron talking about this afternoon's incident. Her ears perked up. You're joking. Seeker? Ron said. But first years, never. You must be the youngest house player in about a century, said Harry, shoveling pie into his mouth. Wood told me. I start training next week, said Harry. Only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret. Fred and George Weasley, she finally learned their names, but she still couldn't tell them apart, now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. Well done, said George in a low voice. Wood told us. We're on the team too, beaters. I tell you, we're going to win that Quidditch Cup for sure this year, said Fred. Hermione rolled her eyes. Boys and their sports. We haven't one since Charlie left, but this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry. Wood was almost skipping when he told us. Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he's found a new secret passageway out of the school. Bet it's that one behind the statue of Gregory the Smarmy that we found in our first year. See you. Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. Hermione froze. Having a last meal, Potter? When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground, and you've got your little friends with you, said Harry coolly. I'd take you on any time on my own, said Malfoy. Tonight, if you want. Wizard's duel, once only, no contact. What's the matter? Never heard of a wizard's duel before, I suppose. Of course he has, said Ron, wheeling around. I'm his second. Who's yours? Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. Crabbe, he said. Midnight all right? We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked. When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other, Hermione strained to hear them. What's a wizard? What's a wizard's duel? Said Harry. And what do you mean you're my second? Well, a second's there to take over if you die, said Ron casually, getting started at last on his cold pie. But people only die in proper duels, with real wizards. The most you and Malfoy will be able to do is send sparks at each other. Neither of you knows enough magic to do any real damage. I bet he expected you to refuse anyway. And what if I wave my wand and nothing happens? I'll throw it away and punch him on the nose, Ron suggested. Hermione couldn't remain silent anymore. If she was going to take Harry under her wing, she couldn't allow this to happen. Maybe since she and Ron ganged up on Draco together, he'd take her side. Excuse me. They both looked down the table at her. Can't a person eat in peace in this place? Said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying. Bet you could, Ron muttered. And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the points you'll lose Gryffindor if you're caught. And you're bound to be. It's really very selfish of you. And it's really none of your business, said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. Harry and Ron got up and walked away. Hermione fought back tears. Hermione spent the rest of the evening figuring out a new plan. She would not be discouraged from Harry and Ron's dismissal. She had to make sure they did the right thing. At first, she thought about telling Percy, but finally concluded she'd have to do it herself. If Harry Potter was expelled, everything was ruined. Sure, she had made some friends, especially Neville, but Hermione still felt isolated among her fellow students. Being friends with Harry Potter would definitely change that. She threw on a robe and crept out of her dorm around 11 o'clock and sat down in the dark Gryffindor common room. Part of her was annoyed because she was wasting precious studying time, but she concluded her plan was slightly more important. At about 11:30, she heard a pattering of feet walking past her. She switched on the lamp to her right. Harry and Ron froze in their tracks. You, said Ron furiously, go back to bed. I almost told your brother, Hermione snapped. Percy, he's the prefect. He'd put a stop to this. Come on, Harry said to Ron. He pushed open the portrait of the fat lady and climbed through the hall. Hermione wasn't going to give up that easily. She followed Ron through the portrait hole, hissing at the boys like a hungry goose. She tried to change tactics, since all they seemed to care about was the stupid house cup. Don't you care about Gryffindor? Do you only care about yourselves? I don't want Slytherin to win the house cup, and you'll lose all the points I got from Professor McGonagall for knowing about switching spells. Go away, Ron whispered. Hermione flinched. She didn't understand why they were being so mean to her. Didn't they realize she was trying to help them not get expelled? She sighed. Maybe it wasn't worth it. All right, but I warned you. You just remember what I said when you're on the train home tomorrow. You're so. Hermione turned to the portrait of the fat lady to get back inside and found herself facing an empty painting. The fat lady had gone on a nighttime visit, and Hermione was locked out of the Gryffindor Tower. Now, what am I going to do? She asked shrilly. Her heart was hammering inside her chest. Not only was her plan failing yet again, but now she was out in the corridors after hours and could get expelled herself. That's your problem, said Ron. We've got to go. We're going to be late. Hermione watched them walk down the hall. Her whole body was vibrating with anxiety. She didn't know what to do. If she was caught, she'd surely be expelled. Her mind wheezed with potential scenarios. The only conceivable solution, the only way she wouldn't be expelled, would be to have Harry and Ron expelled instead. Sure, she'd get a lot of backlash from causing the boy who lived to be expelled, but none of it would matter if she herself was expelled. She made up her mind quickly and ran after the boys. I'm coming with you, she said. You're not. You think I'm going to stand out here and wait for Filch to catch me? If he finds all three of us, I'll tell him the truth, that I was trying to stop you and you can back me up. You've got some nerve, said Ron loudly. Shut up, both of you, said Harry sharply. I heard something. It was a short snuffling. Mrs. Norris? Breathed Ron, squinting through the dark. It wasn't Mrs. Norris. It was Neville. He was curled up on the floor, fast asleep, but jerked suddenly awake as they crept nearer. Thank goodness you found me. I've been out here for hours. I couldn't remember the new password to get into bed. Keep your voice down, Neville. The password speaks out, but it won't help you now. The fat lady's gone off somewhere. How's your arm? Said Harry. Fine, said Neville, showing them. Madame Pomfrey mended it in about a minute. Good. Well, look, Neville, we've got to be somewhere. We'll see you later. Don't leave me, said Neville, scrambling to his feet. I don't want to stay here alone. The Bloody Baron's been past twice already. Ron looked at his watch and then glared furiously at Hermione and Neville. If either of you get us caught, I'll never rest until I've learned that curse of the bogey Squirrel told us about and use it on you. Hermione opened her mouth to tell Ron exactly how to use the curse of the bogies, but Harry hissed at her to be quiet. They flitted along corridors stripped with bars of moonlight from the high windows. At every turn, Hermione expected to run into Filch or Mrs. Norris, but they were lucky. They sped up a staircase to the third floor and tiptoed toward the trophy room. Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there yet. The crystal trophy cases glimmered where the moonlight caught them. Cups, shields, plates, and statues winked silver and gold in the darkness. They edged along the walls, keeping their eyes on the doors at either end of the room. Harry took out his wand in case Malfoy leapt in and started at once. The minutes crept in. He's late. Maybe he's chicken out, Ron whispered. Then a noise in the next room made them jump. Sniff around, my sweet. They might be lurking in a corner. It was Filch speaking to Mrs. Norris. Hermione froze. This was it. She had no idea what to do. Harry waved madly at the other three to follow him as quickly as possible. They scurried silently toward the door, away from Filch's voice. Neville's robes had barely whipped round the corner when they heard Filch enter the trophy room. They're in here somewhere, they heard him mutter. Probably hiding. This way, Harry mouthed to the others, and petrified, they began to creep down a long gallery full of suits of armor. They could hear Filch getting nearer. Neville suddenly let out a frightened squeak and broke into a run. He tripped, grabbed Ron around the waist, and the pair of them toppled right into a suit of armor. The clanging and crashing were enough to wake the whole castle. Run! Harry yelled, and the four of them sprinted down the gallery, not looking back to see whether Filch was following. They swung around the doorpost and galloped down one corridor, then another. Harry was in the lead, without any idea where they were or where they were going. They ripped through a tapestry and found themselves in a hidden passageway, hurtled along it, and came out near their charms classroom, which Hermione knew was miles from the trophy room. I think we've lost him, Harry panted, leaning against the cold wall and whipping his forehead. Neville was bent double, wheezing and spluttering. As soon as Hermione caught her breath, she exploded. I told you! Hermione gasped, clutching at the stitch in her chest. I told you! We've got to get back to Gryffindor Tower, said Ron, quickly as possible. Malfoy tricked you, Hermione said to Harry. She had to make him understand how incredibly stupid and naive he was. You realize that, don't you? He was never going to meet you. Filch knew someone was going to be in the trophy room. Malfoy must have tipped him off. Let's go, Harry said without acknowledging anything of what Hermione had said. It wasn't going to be that simple. They hadn't gone more than a dozen paces when a doorknob rattled and something came shooting out of a classroom in front of them. It was Peeves. He caught sight of them and gave a squeal of delight. Oh, shut up, Peeves, please. You'll get us thrown out. Hermione was at least slightly glad. Harry was finally realizing the gravity of the situation. Peeves cackled. Wandering round at night, ickle firsties. Naughty, naughty, you'll get caughty. Not if you don't give us away, Peeves, please, Harry pleaded. Should tell Filch I should, said Peeves in a sickeningly sweet voice, but his eyes glittered wickedly. It's for your own good, you know. Get out of the way, snapped Ron, taking a swipe at Peeves. This was a big mistake. Students out of bed, Peeves bellowed. Students out of bed, down the Chimes corridor. Ducking under Peeves, they ran for their lives, right to the end of the corridor where they slammed into a door, and it was locked. This is it, Ron moaned as they pushed helplessly at the door. We're done for. This is the end. They could hear footsteps, Filch running as fast as he could towards Peeves' shouts. Oh, move over, Hermione snarled. She was not going to let them get caught if she could help it. She grabbed Harry's wand, tapped the lock, and whispered, Alohomora. She had been working on the unlocking spell for the last few weeks. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. They piled through it, shut it quickly, and pressed their ears against it, listening. Which way did they go, Peeves? Filch was saying. Quickly, tell me. Say please. Don't mess with me, Peeves. Now where did they go? Shan't say nothing if you don't say please, said Peeves in his annoying sing-song voice. All right, please. Nothing. Ha ha ha. Told you I wouldn't say nothing if you didn't say please. Ha ha ha. And they heard the sound of Peeves whooshing away and Filch cursing in rage. He thinks this door is locked, Harry whispered. I think we'll be okay. Get off, Neville. For Neville had been tugging at the sleeve of Harry's bathrobe for the last minute. What? Harry turned around and Hermione followed his gaze. They saw, quite clearly, what? Hermione suppressed a scream. They were in a corridor, the forbidden corridor on the third floor, and now they knew why it was forbidden. They were looking straight into the eyes of a monstrous dog, a dog that filled the whole space between ceiling and floor. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of rolling mad eyes, 3 noses, twitching and quivering in their direction, 3 drooling mouths, saliva hanging in slippery ropes of yellowish fangs. It was standing quite still, all 6 eyes staring at them. And Hermione knew that the only reason they weren't already dead was that their sudden appearance had taken it by surprise. But it was quickly getting over that. There was no mistaking what those thunderous growls meant. Her eyes frantically searched the corridor, looking for something, anything that could help them. After a split second, Hermione realized there were only 3 ways out. Through the dog, through the trapdoor underneath the dog, or the door leading back to Filch. Harry groped for the doorknob between Filch and Beth. He'd take Filch. Hermione quite agreed. They fell backward. Harry slammed the door shut, and they ran. They almost flew back down the corridor. Filch must have hurried off to look for them somewhere else because they didn't see him anywhere. But they hardly cared. All they wanted to do was put as much space as possible between them and that monster. They didn't stop running until they reached the portrait of the fat lady on the seventh floor. Where on earth have you all been? She asked, looking at their bathrobes hanging off their shoulders and their flushed, sweaty faces. Never mind that. Big snout, panted Harry, and the portrait swung forward. They scrambled into the common room and collapsed, trembling, into armchairs. It was a while before any of them said anything. Neville, indeed, looked as if he'd never speak again. Hermione had never felt so invigorated. Running from certain death or certain expulsion was absolutely terrifying, but also exciting. Her adrenaline was pumping for the first time in her life, and she actually liked it. Her mind was still reeling, however. Now that the danger was at bay, the trapdoor burst into her thoughts. What was it? Why was the three-headed dog guarding it? Whatever it was guarding must be extremely important. And then it hit her. Hermione opened her mouth to tell them her theory, but was cut off by Ron. What do they think they're doing keeping a thing like that locked up in a school? Ron said finally. If any dog needs exercise, that one does. The absurdity of that statement nearly made Hermione forget what she was about to say. She blinked a few times to regain her thoughts. You don't use your eyes, any of you, do you? She snapped. Didn't you see what it was standing on? The floor? Harry suggested. I wasn't looking at his feet. It was too busy with its heads. No, not the floor. It was standing on a trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something. She stood up, glaring at them. They weren't worth of her theory about what the dog was guarding. Even if they were, she highly doubted they even knew what the Daily Prophet was, let alone read the article about the Gringotts Bank break-in. She was done trying to save Harry Potter from his own stupidity. She was better without them. I hope you're pleased with yourselves. We could have we could all have been killed, or worse, expelled. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed.